with sturgeon and brown trout, I thought. Wow. Feeling buoyant, I popped up, turned, took 3 steps, and tripped on a sapling stump, face planting on the snow-covered moss. A week later, I showed up at Hayward Fly Fishing Company and found Stu at the counter working on his laptop. Hi, Stu, how are you? Hey, I'm good, what's up? Well, first of all, I need a new net. I lost mine last week. Oh yeah? Where'd you lose it? Somewhere downstream of Tagalder Trail Bridge. What color was it? It was green, light green. Stu smiled. I know where it is. What? I thought it had long gone for good. How do you know where it is? One of my guides found it. He has it at home. I'll call you when he brings it in to the shop. Stu chuckled. Hey, I just lost a sale on a landing net, didn't I? That's the adventure. You guys here?
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna move
sweet.
right.
Very sweet.
Move right
Nice
on.
job, January.
Great story.
Thanks. I'm gonna move in right ahead to, I'm gonna read from a chapter from a book I wrote. And the book is called Cow Tales, Memories of a Rural Animal Doctor. And this incident happened about 40 years ago alongside Highway 53 as you come north into our northern country. And the chapter is called The Mad Axeman. So I'll start right in on that. Cyrus Kane, Eddie Lawson, and I stood next to a dead Holstein dairy cow lying on her side in the short grass along the fence line next to a busy highway. Eddie listened intently as Cyrus pontificated on the subject of death by lightning strike in cattle. Eddie was a 14-year-old boy, tall for his age, but retained a smidgen of youthful pudginess and ineptitude. His t-shirt appeared tight and his trousers short, likely a result of rapid teenage growth. His brown eyes shone brightly and slightly magnified from behind the lenses of his black-rimmed spectacles. Eddie seemed to be quite unfamiliar with farms and farm animals, but liked biology in school and wanted to become a veterinarian, and so I had agreed to his request to accompany me on farm calls for a few days. The case of Cyrus Kane's dead cow was Eddie's first experience with veterinary medicine on the farm. I found her here this morning. Annie, she was, not my best cow, but a steady producer. I'm sure she got struck by lightning last night. Storm came through about midnight, lots of lightning. My insurance man says I can't collect without a vet's signature on his claim form. Ridiculous, I say. I don't need to pay a vet to tell me my cow got hit by lightning. Besides, I saw the burns on her fretlocks and the hemorrhoids in her nostrils. Those are sure signs. I glanced at Eddie as Cyrus rattled on. Eddie remained spellbound, mesmerized by Cyrus and his imaginative knowledge of all things bovine. Cyrus was obviously perturbed about the insurance company requirement to confirm death due to lightning strike by a necropsy performed by a licensed veterinarian. I found enjoyment in Cyrus's use of the veterinary medical language, something he was proud of, but seldom aware of his misuse of terms. I couldn't control my urge to ask a few questions. Burns on the fretlocks, huh? Yep, singed hair right down there by her feet, Doc. Burned her fretlocks right off. Cyrus pointed to the joint just above the cow's hoof. Oh yeah, fetlocks. That's what I said, fretlocks. And you said she has hemorrhoids in her nostrils? Yep, a sure sign of lightning. Look, see the blood? Yeah, you're right, Cyrus. I see some hemorrhoids running out of there. See, Doc, I didn't need to bother you with this. I got it all figured out. Just sign here, Doc, and you can be on your way. Well, I wish I could, Cyrus, but that's not how it works. I can't sign until I perform a full necropsy. I have to examine her outside and inside to be confident she didn't die of some other disease or injury. But Doc, I know, Cyrus. As much as I'd like to, I will not sign without performing a necropsy. Cyrus lowered his head in defeat. Okay, Doc, do what you got to do. An examination to confirm whether or not a cow died from lightning striking her sometimes became more of a process of elimination than finding definitive evidence. If no other cause of death could be found, and if a thunderstorm was in the area, and if the cow died under a tree, lightning strike was a likely cause. Finding definitive evidence of cause of death on a necropsy was a worthy goal, but not always possible. I looked the area over. No trees stood nearby, but she died next to the wire fence, which could have been the conductor of electric current. She did have some blood smear on her nostrils, but I wasn't so sure about the burns on her front box. Eddie, there is an axe in the vet box, bottom drawer in the back. Would you get it for me, please? An axe? Eddie looked puzzled. Yup, a big axe. With a sharp 7-inch knife, I cut through the hide in a kind of oval shape around the chest and pared it back to expose the rib cage. The rib cage had to be removed to expose the heart, lungs, and organs of the forward abdomen. The best tool I could use to accomplish this was my big axe. Eddie returned with the axe and gingerly handed it to me. Stand back, I'm going to chop through the ribs along the backbone first, then the sternum, I warned. Cyrus and Eddie stepped backward a few paces in silence. They both looked a bit baffled, and Eddie, normally rosy-cheeked, turned white. Meanwhile, cars and trucks continued to pass by on the highway. The pasture where we stood was flat and barren with nothing to see but 3 guys, one with a big axe, and a dead cow on the other side of a wire fence about 75 feet from the northbound lane. Engrossed in the job at hand, I was unaware of the psychotic scene the motorists were about to observe. Straddling the dead cow's neck and facing back toward her posterior, I raised the axe high over my head and swung it down forcefully on the last rib, freeing its attachment to the spine. In fluid motion, I raised the axe again and swung it down, freeing the next rib from the spine. As I continued freeing ribs, I noticed Eddie had disappeared. Cyrus stood by dumbfounded, and motorists braked and gawked. I was creating a traffic jam. Not aware I looked like a lunatic in a dark blue prison overall. Now aware I looked like a lunatic in a dark blue prison overall, axe murdering and mutilating a defenseless placid bovine. I quickened the pace, which only served to enhance the perception. Up and down went the axe through 13 ribs along the spine, and then along their attachments to the sternum. 3 cars had pulled over and stopped along the roadside, exacerbating the traffic jam. One motorist with a camera rolled down her window, snapped a photo, and shook her head side to side in disgust. Tossing the freed rib cage aside, I dropped to my knees and began pawing through the chest and gut organs, ripping out the lungs and the heart and groping lengths of intestine. Or it appeared that way to the gawkers. I was actually examining each internal organ for pathology consistent with death by lightning, albeit in a frenzied fashion. Traffic slowed to a crawl. 2 more cars stopped on the road's shoulder. One motorist climbed out and approached the fence. I sprung to my feet and sprinted toward Cyrus, bloody axe in hand. Cyrus's eyes widened. Startled, he turned and loped toward his truck. No, Cyrus, wait, I want to sign. Cyrus held up and looked over his shoulder. I stopped running, bent over, gasping for air. You what? I want to sign your insurance claim. Cyrus relaxed, grinned, and removed the insurance claim document from inside his jacket. Here you go, Doc. Sign right here. See? I told you it was lightning. That hemorrhoid in her nostrils, that's a sure sign. I hastily signed the document. Yep, Cyrus, you were right. Now let's get out of here before the sheriff shows up. So that's what I heard after.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Thanks so much. I think we'll just move right on to Carol and then save our question and comments for just when Carol is done. Is that okay with you, Carol? If we go right to you?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dave Mills. And we're going to move over to Carol Dunbar right now, just trying to stay on time here. And then we'll definitely loop back and have time for questions and comments. Carol Dunbar is a working writer and former actor who left her life in the city to move off grid. Her first novel, The Net Beneath Us, won the Edna Ferber Fiction Book Award, received a WLA Literary Award for Outstanding Achievement, and was named an honoree for the Society of Midland Authors Fiction Book Award. Her second novel, A Winter's Rime, that's R-I-M-E, look it up, released in the fall of 2023. Her stories have appeared in the New York Times, LitHub, the South Carolina Review, and others. Carol's essays about living off the grid can be heard on Wisconsin Public Radio. She writes from a solar-powered office on the second floor of a water tower in northwestern Wisconsin, where she lives in a house in the woods with her husband, 2 kids, and a Great Pyrenees mountain dog. Carol Dunbar, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much for the introduction. Dave, I really enjoyed your stories very much. It's a privilege to be here. I love that we have a group of people assembling for love of a region. That's a pretty special thing. I do live in the woods, and I was married along the water, as Tom mentioned earlier. My husband and I had an outdoor wedding ceremony along the St. Croix River in the little town of Marine on the St. Croix. And we rented out the hall there for our guests for a big celebration. And we got into a little bit of trouble because the hall there is a pretty old building, so they limit it to only 250 people. And I didn't think this was going to be a problem because we only invited 200 people to our wedding, which is a lot. And it was going to be a fun Irish Scottish kind of wedding. We had an Irish band. We were going to do line dancing and a ceilidh, and my husband wanted to have a kilt made in Scotland. Not the Dunbar plaid, though, because the Dunbar plaid is atrocious, but a pleasing plaid. So he had a kilt made, and all 10 of his best men wore kilts. And I didn't know what traditional Scottish attire entailed, but it involved a sash and a purse and knee-high socks. And there was a rumor going around, unbeknownst to me, that the men were going to wear the tradition as to what they wear under their kilts. And I didn't know this rumor was going around. I didn't even know what men wore under their kilts. And it turns out, I found out in the middle of our reception, our party, when the caterer came up to me. The band was playing and the kilt skirts were flying, and she came running up to me and she said, "You didn't tell me that you invited another 70 guests." And I said, "We didn't." She ran out of food. She had to order more food. We ran out of ice. We had about 70 people crash our wedding because it turns out what men wear under their kilts is the breath of God. So that's my story about Marine on the St. Croix and my wedding. We did plant a tree during our wedding ceremony right on the banks of the river. And this was 25 years ago. And I had no idea when we were planting our tree that trees would factor and become so important in my life. So I have a piece I'm going to read to you about how I learned that I was finally done with my novel. I spent 12 years on my first novel, which is a really long time. And the question that writers ask me the most is, how did you know you were done? So I will be sharing that essay with you tonight. But first, I want to just tell you a little bit about what I'm doing here in a water tower off the grid. So 26 years ago, my husband and I were living in Minneapolis. I was not a working writer. I was a working actor, doing as much theater as I could. And I was best known for my smoking and gambling commercials, is what my aunt called them, because I did one ad for Castino. And I came to the realization that I was a storyteller working in the wrong art form. And I didn't know what to do about that. I all my friends were actors. I had married an actor. It was my identity. I had invested 12 years in this dream. And I didn't know how to extract myself from that lifestyle. And then one day, my husband sat down on a bench in an airport next to an advertisement circled in ink for an off-grid homestead with a working sawmill. And this was significant because my husband had this vision. He had taught himself woodworking, and he wanted to build furniture from trees he knew and felled and air dried on our land. I wanted to be a writer. So we came. We did not look at other property. We did not research the schools. We just said yes. And we arrived wearing our city shoes and our bug spray with a 15-month-old daughter and an aging dog. And we had no idea what we were doing. In this area, the way we live is really not all that original. A lot of people do it, but we had never done anything like this before. We were a couple of actors trying to live off grid, which meant we were not connected to the public utility lines. So we generate our own electricity. We pump water from a well, and we heat our home exclusively with wood. We did everything wrong for our first couple of years. We froze our pipes several times. We endured a winter without running water. There was a summer when we changed out the wood stove in our home, and we accidentally sealed a family of mice inside our walls. And I remember that time because I had been working on a short story that I was excited about, and I printed out a draft and I set it on my desk with a red pen, and I was going to go over it the next morning and do edits. And when I came to my desk that morning, my draft was sprinkled with mouse turds. I was so disgusted. I was horrified. I rang my husband on the walkie-talkie, called him at the wood shop. I said, "There's mouse droppings all over my draft." And he said, "Darling, everyone's a critic." So I had a lot to learn about how to live this way. We do not operate microwaves or toasters or a dishwasher, and it's been 20 years since I've had a clothes dryer. But the truth is, I struggled less with what we live without and more with who we live with, the bugs, the voles, the skunk that wouldn't let me up to my wood pile, the porcupine that almost bankrupted us because our dog kept trying to eat it. I was searching for a wise woman. I wanted a mentor. I wanted someone to come walking out of my woods and take my hands and say, "Honey, this is how you do it." I was looking for this person, and I never found her. But what I did find was help from a very unexpected place. My relationship with the trees happened very organically in my new role as a woodworker's wife. I spent hours rubbing wood with sandpaper, with tung oil, with beeswax. And I remember the very first time I really connected with wood and understood that it had wisdom to teach me. And it was when I was finishing a piece of wood that came from a very special tree. It was an ash tree that had been growing along the St. Croix River, one of those big old trees that was leaning out way over the river along the bank. And it fell in a windstorm one summer. And it was on the property where we had gotten married. So my husband's parents called and offered him the wood. So he went down and he got it and he slabbed it out, and he was really excited to honor this tree that he had known all growing up. Took about 3 to 5 years to dry the wood. And then one day he was in the wood shop, he was ready to build with it, and he was butterflying the board. He was planing it through his table saw when all of a sudden these orange sparks came shooting out, and it made a horrible noise. And this object came projectiling out of the saw across the room. He turned the saw off, he ran over and found a bullet that had been lodged in the heartwood of the tree. And when I was finishing this wood, I could see the year the bullet hit the tree. I could see the black fragments of the gunpowder and how it had spread out, and how the tree had grown this protective ring around it. And then every year afterwards, there was a different color bleeding out. It went from smoky grays to blues to greens and lavender, and then it got into corals and mauve and peach and ambers. And every year was a new ring, and every year it addressed that wound. And looking at that story in the wood was a very powerful moment for me personally. It really helped me to understand that it's our wounds that can help us grow into developing character and make us more interesting. And it was a very powerful lesson right there in the tree. So that's where it started for me. And I took it from there. And by the time I got to writing my first novel, I was looking at the research of Peter Wohlleben, who is a biologist, best known for his groundbreaking book, The Hidden Life of Trees. So if you know his work, or if you've ever seen the PBS documentary, The Hidden Life of Trees, then you know about the network beneath us, the root systems and the mycelium network that connects the trees, and the way they support each other, the way they care for their young, the way they care for their dying. That's the kind of wisdom that I am drawing on for this novel. So that is your introduction to me. And now I'm going to go ahead and read this essay. It was published in Brevity, and I wrote it because this was the question I got asked the most. And this is my answer. How do you know when it's done? I was about to send off what was to be the final draft of my first book to my agent when I had the heart-stopping thought, what if I rewrote the book again? How much better could it be? The thought made me go so weak in the knees, I had to sit down. My writing studio sits on the second floor of a building in the woods with windows on all four sides. In my reading chair next to a window, I sat at branch level with the trees. It was fall, and the paper birch outside my window was releasing its leaves. No other tree was dropping its leaves. It was not a windy day. There were no storms brewing or clouds scudding. The air was perfectly still. The woods were approaching peak color, and I did not know why this particular tree was choosing now to release its leaves. They cascaded by the hundreds, whispering as they fell. I thought about the hundreds of pages of failed drafts and the many times I'd already rewritten this book. I was not afraid of doing the work. I knew I could do it, but would another rewrite result in a better book or just a different book? Because my first novel is largely about trees and what they can teach us, and because I live with them and had been doing a lot of research, I had an epiphany in that moment. Without any further deliberation, I knew suddenly and without a doubt that it was time for me to release this book, and I knew why. The one question I get asked at every reading is, how do you know when it's done? Maybe people ask me this because they know it took me 12 years to finish my first novel. Maybe it's because they are also trying to finish a book and they understand the cycle of improving and progressing while at the same time realizing how much further you have to go. Whenever you undertake a large project, whether fiction or nonfiction, things happen during the process. Your skills improve, the world changes, your understanding deepens. Sometimes you even outgrow your idea. No one wants to give up on their book, but sometimes walking away is the right thing to do. Other times, it's not. Other times, you need to take the 10 or 12 or 20 years to dig deeper until you uncover what it is you're looking for, what you're trying to say, and what your book is teaching you. I like to think you can't rush a book any more than you can rush a plant. My first novel took me 12 years because I started writing it 2 weeks after my husband had an accident with a table saw. He's okay now, but for an entire year, he lost the use of his right hand. Our children were ages 2 and 5. We heat our home exclusively with wood. It was fall. Winter was coming, and I did not know how to split firewood. I also didn't know how to plot a novel, how to toggle between scene and summary. I didn't know about rotating narratives or psychic distance or novel thought. I did not even have a room to write in during most of the process. But I wrote because I had to make sense of this time in my life. I wrote to mourn who we had been and what we had lost. We lost the furniture business. I wrote to understand why living this way was so hard and what it was teaching me. I wrote to give voice to an understanding that was taking shape and connected to a world that was bigger than just me. And I could only find that understanding by going back to this material again and again. I wrote to put all these things into a time capsule that would keep for eternity. And then 12 years later, because of that tree, I knew it was done. The leaves tumbled down in streams with the yellows, the color of stained glass. From my high school science class, I knew about photosynthesis and how in the autumn the leaves fell. But before that moment, I had never seen a tree choosing to drop its leaves. I'd always assumed they fell when they got knocked off or ripped from the branches by high winds. But no, a tree chooses to let its leaves go once it is no longer receiving nourishment from them. At that point, it must let them go, because if it doesn't, the tree won't survive the winter. The tree also wouldn't go on to regenerate new growth in the spring, and the cycle of photosynthesis would not continue. I knew I was done with this book because it was no longer teaching me. I had learned what I set out to understand and found the answers to the questions I had asked. It was time to release my leaves, to let these pages go, not because they were perfect, but because to me they were beautiful. And if I didn't let them go, they would shrivel and die while still clutched in my hands. My stories will never be perfect, but I must let them go before I twist the life out of them. And I have many more leaves to grow. So that is my essay. I think it's getting very dark in here. And then just my closing remark. If I was going to say the two, what connects my two books, and what I learned from the process of writing them, if I had to boil it down to one sentence, I would say this. I would say that speaking about our environment, I would say there is more help available to us in this world than we may know. And that's my time for tonight. Thank you for listening.
Carol, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, if you have comments or questions, folks, be thinking of them. Carol, that was, gosh, I have so many things to chat with you about when we see you next time. And Dave, same thing. Would each of you comment on what keeps you going now with your various books and publications you've had? What, Dave, first maybe, what keeps you going writing? And then Carol.
Well, I like it.
Yeah.
But when I joined the St. Croix Writers Group, that helps too. It's an extra push to have something to share, and I enjoy that group so much. So that is very, very helpful too, and good support with that. Yeah, I have a few ideas I'm working on. The book that I wrote. Don't buy it if you ever thought about buying it. It's I don't know if you can see it, but it's this is what it looks like. The reason is that the mom and pop publisher I went with has folded, and I got the rights back, and I'm working on 6 more chapters and blah blah blah. But it's gonna hopefully it'll come out again in a different form. So
fantastic.
Anyway,
yeah. Carol, what you gave us a lot of insight, but now that you're off to you said you have another novel underway. I won't reveal that, but just what drives you?
I think I want to understand this whole business of being a human being. I really, when I'm writing, I think it's kind of personal. I think I'm working something out, I'm working through something that's on my mind. And so I'm also learning about something that I want to know more about. So I love it when I read novels and I learn things. Like listening to David's piece tonight, I learned a lot about being a vet and how do you diagnose a lightning strike? I mean, I find that really fascinating. And I like to learn new industries, learn about new industries or dive into things I'm curious about. When I'm working on a novel, that inspires me. But mostly, I am really interested in empathy and exploring ways we can understand each other better. So I like to write from a character perspective first. My stories are very character driven, and I like to write about people that are interesting to me because I want to understand them and I want to present them in a way so that we can all understand them.
Wow, yeah, that's a mission. In fact, Jasmine, do you have, or Carol, did you send Jasmine the picture of your workshop there? Do you have that one, Jasmine?
I didn't send it. I dropped the ball on that. I'm sorry, Tom.
Oh, okay. We had a picture of Carol's second floor workshop and the story of the flood that you had there one day and what kept you going from that. That's a whole session in itself, but that is quite a story. Others, folks, do you have comments or questions or anything? I myself, Debbie too, we write about nature and about the wild and so forth. So much of what Carol and Dave have brought to us resonates with us, but how about others? What would you like to know or comment on? Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say first, it's so great to see friends and others that I've met, and it's such a lovely group tonight. David, I wondered if you could go back into your essay when you gave the translation for what Namekagon means. I'm really interested in that because I spend a lot of time on that river too, but I didn't know what the Ojibwe translation was, or the English translation from the Ojibwe name.
It's sturgeon something.
Yeah.
Sturgeon?
Namekagon.
What's that?
Big sturgeon, large.
Yeah, it's a river of abundant sturgeon.
River
And-
of abundant sturgeon. Okay.
Yeah, let me make sure that I got that right when it's and the what I found was the Ojibwe was it's Namekagon ZB. So it's NAMEKAAGONG dash ZIIBI. And the translation that I found was river at the place abundant with sturgeon.
Okay.
So to me, that kind of means it's probably downriver from where I was. I've seen sturgeon a few times, but usually closer to the St. Croix. They're probably, I know they're up higher too, but yeah.
Thank you.
I'm way up in the north of Hayward part of it when I fish. So yeah.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. Others?
Yeah, I have a question. Dave, you mentioned that the fishing opener, the date was before you were out there, and yet it was too cold to fish. So how I didn't understand that disconnect.
Oh, it opened on January 6th, but I couldn't get away till the 9th, and the 6th was a Saturday, and I think I went on the 9th, 6th, 7th, 8th, Tuesday in the week. The other reason is I like to go in the middle of the week in case somebody else is out there.
I
But,
guess I was just wondering why it was that date when it was so cold and it was too early to actually fish there.
Oh, well, it isn't. I mean, it opens on January 6th, but I didn't even know that anybody ever would fly fish at that time of year. There's usually a big shelf of ice along the, it's hard to access and all that kind of thing. But this year, of course, with this very warm winter, 28 degrees in January was like balmy compared to what what it usually is. So yeah, I mean, I didn't even consider it till I saw Stu Neville's Facebook page mention that it opened January 6th. Why they do that, I don't know. It's not ice fishing.
Yeah, sounds crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
will never-
my
Go ahead.
my husband and I, this is Gary and I'm Marty, and we're working on a book right now about two sandhills that adopted a crane, a goose. They adopted a goose, and so, a gosling. And so today's was the whole thing was particularly inspiring to us, especially Carol, you saying, when will you know when you're done? I don't think we're ever going to be done. We're kind of in that spot where it might be another 11 years. We'll see.
How delightful. What a wonderful premise. How long is this? So you watch this little
It's a
gosling?
reality. It's not just a premise. It happened. We watched it over 2 seasons. They
Wow.
raised the goose as one of their own, and they migrated together and they came back.
Ah,
2 seasons we've watched this family. Now this year,
We're watching again.
we don't know, and we will not know anymore, I don't think.
We'll figure it out.
Not just very confident. We'll identify the actual goose among geese on our lake. We'll see.
oh, wow.
But I just wanted to say, both of you actually bringing a book to fruition, I think is totally amazing. It's akin to giving birth in its miraculous emergence on the world. And Tom, you have a whole bunch of offspring, and I'm just in awe of anyone who actually does this. So we'll see. We'll get it done someday.
Yeah.
Yes,
It
I'll
becomes-
be rooting for you. I want to read that.
Yeah.
All right, it's a deal.
I always come at anything I write, it really is phenology, and phenology, as you know, is the preserving of what is happening in the world around us. So if someone 100 years or 1,000 years or 10,000 years happens to pick up our digital formats or our print format, they'd have a pretty good idea of what was going on around here. So just as Carol and Dave do, and you too with your book, observing what happens in the natural world and how we we critters interact with those, and then putting it in a form that is tangible and that can be preserved. That's what I always feel is my mission. And it can be done in many ways through music and poetry and words, art of other types. Yeah,
Mary
preserve.
Oliver has a very sweet little line from one of her poems. And it is kind of rules for living. She would never say that, but it's pay attention, be amazed, and tell about it. And that's really what you guys have done tonight. You've paid attention for a long, long time. And you've been amazed by what you've seen, and you've told us about it. And I'm grateful. Thank you.
Who else would like to ask or comment? Anyone?
I'll ask.
Go ahead.
I don't know how often this occurs. This is the first time I've joined, so thank you for letting me be among you. And but the St. Croix Writers Group.
Yes.
How long has this been? What is it? And
Oh,
how does it organize? I don't know anything about it.
We would love to tell you about that. In Solon Springs here, St. Croix Writers of Solon Springs. The group was founded in 1989. And we are a charter group a charter member of Wisconsin Writers Association, which was founded in 1948. But we meet every Tuesday, 9:30 throughout the year, Tuesday morning, 9:30 for about 2 hours, and everyone is welcome. It's totally free. Rebecca has come, Dave, Debbie, and I, others of you have come. And Lynne. It's people who, Lynne, Susan. Yes, Lynne, Susan. We write across all genres and all art forms, really. Novels, nonfiction. We meet in Solon Springs now we used to be at the community center, but we meet for free at Our Savior's Lutheran Church. And it's real easy to get to. You just come into Solon are you coming south of Solon Springs or north?
Well, I'm from Stillwater, so it's not likely I'll come up there for this.
Yeah,
forgive me for that.
Yeah. Well, in fact, there are several writers groups in your area too. And if you go on the Wisconsin Writers Association website, we have a listing of just about all of the regional writers bunches. And I'll bet you'll find someone. I know the Kinnickinnick writers over in the River Falls area, and I'm sure around Stillwater, there've got to be writers groups.
There are. That's right. There are.
Yeah. I was going to say, just as a parting thought, I deeply into my memory is carved the image of from about when I was 15 or so. I was out in my canoe fishing for panfish in Upper St. Croix Lake, and the boat near me, the woman was casting, and suddenly the boat just started to move with her line. It was pulling her, and she had hooked a sturgeon, and she couldn't unhook it. And I never did find out exactly what happened on that, but it was so powerful that she was in just a small craft like I was, a paddling rowboat, and the sturgeon had control, and it was just simply swimming her ahead. So, and I don't know, Jason, maybe you know, or others, if there are still sturgeons in Upper St. Croix Lake, but I'll never forget that image. And
yes, Tom, I do believe there are.
Okay. Yep.
From what I've heard. And I've seen that happen. I've seen a sturgeon get hooked from a kayak in the St. Louis River, and it was quite an escapade.
It looks like magic. It's kind of like it's just happening. Yeah, Carol.
Our daughter caught a sturgeon in the St. Croix River one summer. It was about this big. It was white. It was beautiful. She made a painting of it, and we threw it back. I hope it made it.
Wow. Yeah. It's good to know we still have them in this lake, and I'm sure in the rest of the St. Croix system. There still are deadhead logs down there, so you never quite know what you've hooked into sometimes. I've had that happen where you hook into a deadhead log that's sunk and it's waterlogged and underneath. In fact, water skiers often always have to be a little bit careful on that. Well, folks, thanks. That was a great session. Thanks to Dave. Thanks to Carol. Thank you, everyone, for checking in. And give everyone an applause there, folks. This was great.
Thank you.
Jasmine, so we'll keep in touch, and Jasmine and Alyssa and Monica there at NWWHQ will be in touch about when we do this again. Thanks, folks.
Thank
Thank
Happy
you.
you.
spring tonight at 10:06.
Thank you.
It turns spring, so
Thank you.
celebrate. See you next time. So
All
long.
right.
Good night.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Bye, everybody.